Hello, Christ Church family. I'm sure everybody knows that today is an important anniversary. It's the 19th anniversary of 9/11. You know, 19th anniversaries don't always get a lot of attention. I'm sure next year, when it's the 20th anniversary, there'll be a lot more said about what happened, lots of speeches, lots of programs. But my mind turns to that day on this anniversary. I remember on September 11th, 2002, on the one-year anniversary of this tragic attack on our country, when our church opened up for a community-wide worship service. The themes of the service were love of country, gratitude for God and God's care for our country, and a chance for some prayer and some healing for people who were still broken up and brokenhearted about the fact that such violence was brought to our shores. Then the pastor we invited to preach stood up, and she read this scripture to us. You have heard that it was said, love your enemy, love your neighbors, or you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. She then went on to use the pulpit to talk about how we needed to understand the people who attacked us. She used the pulpit to question our response as a country and whether or not going to arms was the right thing to do. Now, it's hard to remember what it felt like back then, but in that moment, when our aim was to comfort and to give thanks, I got angry. I felt like this was not the time or the place to harangue a group of people who've come brokenhearted to worship. And when the service was over, I pulled her aside and I said, I got to tell you, I don't appreciate the way that you use that text in this moment to beat up on that congregation. It made me very angry. Now, she was very poised, and she said, Jeff, if that's the first time that this text ever made you angry, maybe it's the first time you ever really understood it. I learned a couple of things in that moment. First, I learned, don't argue with pacifists because they don't fight fair. But I also learned something else. That sometimes what the church is called to teach is offensive to the ways of the world. I guess I think about that today because we're going to have a big moment next year on the 20th anniversary, and quite honestly, I wondered what our country is going to be like next year on 9/11. We're having conversations right now about violence in the streets, that we may have violence in the streets after the election, that we might have a contested election, and there's so much anger, and there's such a lack of grace right now on all sides. The church has something to say about this, not just from the pulpit, but in the way that we conduct ourselves between now and the next election, and now and the next year. The church is the hope of the world, more so now than ever. We as followers of Jesus are called to be peacemakers first. Politics and everything else falls behind that. So my prayer for us as a church is that we will model grace for the rest of the world. That people who we believe are hurting us, that are in contention with us, that we'll be quick to listen and quicker to forgive, to lay aside all hurt. I don't claim to know all the politics around this and the right policy prescriptions that are needed to bring peace to our land. But I know that if the church will model grace and mercy and forgiveness today, with people that we disagree with passionately today, then we have hope to be a nation of peace. I look forward to seeing everybody in worship this Sunday. We'll have worship at 8:30 and 11 o'clock and live stream at 11 o'clock as well.